A Quiet Place is maybe the most up and down franchise in modern day cinema. Each film presents its own really good qualities, as well as some really bad qualities.
No, stop! What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh my God! No!
In the past 6 years, it has quickly become one of the most popular horror series of all time. So I'm going to rank this short but mixed franchise on this tier list. And at the end, I'm gonna see how the newest film, A Quiet Place Day One, compares to the original two. So let's get started where this series began. You had to be there when the original A Quiet Place hit theaters. It was one of the most anticipated movies of spring 2018 and really delivered, making over $340 million on a $17 million budget. People were really digging the premise, and to this day, I still remember my theater experience. It was silent in that theater, except for that one guy munching on his popcorn. But the movie itself is really uneven. It has a really strong family story with impactful emotional beats, but it's also plagued by logical inconsistencies, baffling character decisions, and questionable mechanics. The youngest of the family, Bo, dies early on. It's really sad and has a huge narrative impact. But in order for this kid to die, this entire family has to be kinda stupid. First of all, Reagan gives him the spaceship and then just leaves without making sure he didn't swipe the batteries. And then when the family is walking home, no one is watching him. They're just letting him walk in back unsupervised. Even though it's incredibly dumb for this family to do this, the scene is still executed very well. It's heartbreaking to see this family be unable to do anything and are forced to watch and try their best not to cry. This is such an impactful way to begin this film, and it really stuck with people. But the world building in this first film is odd at times. There are some scenes, like with the possums on the roof, that don't make sense. These possums make a huge noise, then scurry away and are then killed by the aliens. But why weren't the aliens attracted to the loud noises of the lamp falling down or of the possums on the roof? They're instead attracted to the noise of the possums scurrying away? Seems really odd to me. But the aliens themselves are really unique. Their design really works as a super fast, super strong, freaky alien creature. The head design is especially cool with the armor plates breaking away to reveal the ears, if you can call those ears. Maybe they're just, you know, like hearing orifices. It's also pretty cool how they're not fully revealed until the end of the movie. For most of the time that we see them, they're shown in really quick bursts or blurred in the background. They sort of have that Jaws or Xenomorph effect, and it makes them that much more scary. But there is some goofiness to this movie. The scene in the basement where Lee has a bunch of stuff written on the whiteboard is so silly. It might as well have said, "Hey audience, look at the important information. It's right here, all laid out in front of you. We're gonna stay on this whiteboard long enough for you to get all the necessary information." That's right. They're good at hearing. They're bulletproof. There's about 3 of them. Did you get it? Did you get the information? Okay, we're moving on. And there are tons of other inconsistent plot holey things in this film, like Evelyn not seeing the nail sticking up even though she knows her bag caught on something, or Lee not noticing the water leaking that eventually floods his basement and puts his wife and kid in danger, or the fact that they somehow have electricity. There's no power plants active, and if there were, wouldn't the aliens go sicko mode on it? And even if the family had their own power generator, those things are still very loud, so I don't know where their electricity is coming from. But like I mentioned, the movie does have a very strong emotional core, and the members of this family are all very well characterized. Marcus doesn't get a ton of focus. He's clearly not ready for this world. He's terrified of everything, but he has this small little arc of facing his fear. Evelyn also doesn't really get a lot. She kind of shares a character arc with Lee about making up for their mistake with Bo by trying even harder to protect their kids. But Emily Blunt gives a really solid performance in this film, especially towards the climax of the movie where she's going into labor and she's hiding in the tub. I've seen some scared acting in my days as a movie watcher, but this is next level. Lee and Reagan also have a really well crafted story. Reagan feels the most guilt over Bo's death and thinks Lee blames her for it. She thinks this because he's always fiddling around in the basement where she's not allowed, or taking Marcus on hikes without her. But in all reality, Lee does love her and doesn't blame her at all. He's just working hard to make a hearing aid for her so she can be safer and experience the things that he shows Marcus. And their story has a heartbreaking conclusion when he sacrifices himself to save her and her brother. Man, 2018 was a rough year for Office stars. But really, this is one of the best sacrifice scenes in all of horror, and John Krasinski's heartful performance is really what makes this devastating. And speaking of John Krasinski, This man is a really talented horror director. There are so many scenes of pure terror, from the more extreme examples like Evelyn in the tub, to even something as simple as Lee carefully taking the batteries out of the toy spaceship. It's kind of crazy how even the smallest things can make you scared in this movie. And just talking pure visuals, this is a gorgeous looking movie with so many memorable shots. The sound design also helps with the horror aspect. You hear each and every tiny noise that's made, and also the absence of sound is also terrifying. The scenes we hear from Regan's point of view are very tense. This is truly one of the most butt-clenching movies ever made. So yeah, the first A Quiet Place film is not perfect by any means. The script has more holes than Sonny Corleone, but it has some fantastic horror directing, likable characters, and really powerful emotional beats. So I'm going to put A Quiet Place in C tier.
Jim is gone. He's gone. I miss him so much.
One of the most controversial aspects of A Quiet Place Part 2 is the fact that it even exists. I still remember when it was first announced that people were rolling their eyes. Most audiences didn't think there was much story left to tell. But Part 2 is a more than worthy sequel that expands on the world, introduces new concepts, and is flat out better than the original. First of all, we have a new male lead, Emmett, played by Cillian Murphy, and this is a very different role for him. When I think about Cillian Murphy's filmography, I think of him as a tortured scientist, or a psychopath, or both, but he really delivers as this hardened survivalist who's lost all hope. And Emmett has a really well-written arc of regaining his hope by going on the journey with Regan, seeing how other communities can survive, and seeing how these aliens can be killed. He might honestly be my favorite character of this entire franchise. I really resonated with him. The returning family members are also very compelling. It's heartbreaking to watch them deal with the aftermath of their home being destroyed and of Lee's death. This feels like a genuine grieving family, and I like that this movie splits them up, but the quality of the stories feels a bit uneven. The story with Evelyn, Marcus, and the baby back at the warehouse is significantly worse than the adventure Emmett and Regan go on. It has some intense moments like when Evelyn sets off the sprinklers, and it's more emotional moments, like when Evelyn leaves her wedding ring on Beau's grave marker. But there's only danger in this part of the story because Marcus makes a baffling decision. Evelyn leaves him in charge of watching the baby, and he's scared. Rightfully so. Babies are absolutely terrifying. But while he's waiting for his mom to get back, he climbs out of safety, walks up to the second floor on his busted foot, makes a loud noise that attracts an alien, and now there's a big problem. This kid was afraid of his own shadow. I don't believe for one second he would willingly leave the safety of the basement to try and spot his mom. But at least he has somewhat of a decent character arc. He eventually learns to get over his fear when there's no other options left, and the scene of him protecting his mother and sibling and killing the alien is really powerful. But really, these portions of the movie were my least favorite ones. I much prefer the story of Regan and Emmett trying to find the radio signal they heard. This reminds me a lot of The Last of Us, if The Last of Us was good. Their adventure together does a good job at expanding this world and showing the audience how far society has collapsed. Once populated areas are now completely empty, the humans that are around have become animalistic and dangerous, and normal people have to live on islands to get away from danger. The isolation we felt on the farm in the first film was really cool, but I'm really happy this film decided to abandon that to go on this grand adventure. And once Emmett and Regan make it onto the island, we get to meet Djimon Hounsou's character and the rest of the... yeah, okay, these guys are boring as hell.
Boom. Roasted.
These people are pretty much just cannon fodder. I mean, Djimon Hounsou is a fantastic actor, but he only exists to be killed. He doesn't even have a name, he's just man on island. Hopefully he becomes more of a character in A Quiet Place Day 1. This side of the story also has a couple dumb character moments and some plot contrivances, like the alien who stumbled onto the boat just happened to float over to the island. That was lucky. Or Djimon Hounsou's character getting himself killed by thinking the alien still isn't following them. The inconsistencies aren't as bad as the ones in the previous film, but it's clear the series still hasn't ironed out all the kinks. But also like the original film, there are many awesome and tense sequences. The movie opens with a Day 1 sequence that's very entertaining. I'm sure they did this just so they can say John Krasinski was in the movie and put him in all the trailers, but I don't care. It has a couple impressive one takes with Lee and Regan running away, and Evelyn and the boys in the car. And just in general, it's fun to see these characters at a time when it wasn't the end of the world. Also, while it is silly that the alien wound up on the island, the reveal is very scary, especially when you combine it with Emmett sprinting and screaming at everyone to take shelter. But the one sequence that got me the most was towards the beginning of the movie, when Marcus gets his foot caught in a bear trap and he just starts screaming his head off. Jeez, man, this kid will not shut up. And the whole sequence where Emmett leads them to safety is very intense. So yeah, I really enjoyed A Quiet Place Part 2 more than the first film. It still suffers a bit in the script department, but it more than makes up for it with creative, scary scenes, impressive world building, fantastic performances, and well-written characters. So I'm going to put A Quiet Place Part 2 in A tier. And just a heads up, there will be no spoilers from here on out as we talk about the latest movie.
Right here is my favorite New York pizza joint. And I'm gonna go get me a New York slice.
I'm gonna be honest, I had no real expectations for A Quiet Place day one. I enjoyed the first two movies just fine, but without the Abbott family or John Krasinski in the director's chair, I honestly didn't know what we were gonna get. But not only is this one of the best movies of 2024, this is the best film in the entire series. For starters, I think the new setting is a refreshing change of pace. It's really fascinating to see how New York City, one of the loudest places on earth, falls into silence. And the film makes good use of this setting by showing many different alien encounters in different areas of the city. We see them attack people in busy intersections, in the subway, and dropping down from high rises. It really feels like the same creature feature spectacle from the original two films, now elevated to a much bigger scale. And when talking about the scares, this new movie is on par with the original too. This is the first film not directed by John Krasinski. He only served as a producer and story co-writer alongside Michael Sarnowski, who wrote the screenplay and was the director. And he killed it directing this movie. There are so many memorable, very intense scenes, and I think he framed these monsters in an almost more threatening way. The first scene where we have an alien slowly walking around trying to find someone is terrifying. You can feel the impact of its feet on the ground. You can hear its silent growling and clicking. The creature feels like it has an actual presence in the room. I think these aliens are scarier than they've ever been in this movie. The cinematography is also so gorgeous, especially during the scene where the bridges are bombed. Man, the lighting and the framing perfectly captures the absolute devastation these characters are feeling. Pat Scola did the cinematography, and he previously worked with Michael Sarnowski on Pig with Nicolas Cage, which I haven't seen yet, but this movie really sold me on this duo. So I actually did buy the movie and I will watch it at some point. I mean, it's got Nicolas Cage. I was named after the guy. I'm sure I'm gonna love it. I will say though, if you're someone like me who doesn't like jump scares, A Quiet Place Day 1 will be a tough watch. There are a ton of jump scares, so be warned. But while this movie has a bunch of cool, scary, tense scenes, while it's gorgeous and makes full use of its setting, those weren't the best parts of the movie. My favorite part of the film was the story. This whole movie is really about a woman trying to get a slice of pizza. Yeah, that's the actual story. It sounds really funny when I say it like that, but it's really profound. I don't want to get into specifics because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but A Quiet Place Day 1 presents an impactful narrative of someone learning to live in the world where everyone else is just surviving. And these two main characters are both really well written. I was so invested in the story about two completely different people from completely different lives with completely different issues coming together to find some kind of solace in this devastating world. And the movie found really creative ways to have these characters interact with each other, because obviously they can't speak to one another for big stretches of the movie. I adored Sam and Eric, and their friendship is the thing that propels this movie to being excellent. Lupita Nyong'o is a very seasoned actor at this point, but I honestly believe this is her finest performance. She brings a lot of complexity and vulnerability to Sam, and I found myself getting a little weepy-eyed because of how moving her performance was. Also, Joseph Quinn was a big surprise. I don't know why I let the freaks on movie Twitter make me believe this guy was a bad actor, because he's not at all. He's so great as this anxious and scared man who latches onto the first person he finds. I don't know why June has two different movies with really accurate depictions of anxiety attacks, but here we are. And after this movie, I'm more than sold on him being the new Johnny Storm. Also, how cool is it that we have two of the new Fantastic Four in this series? Oh wait, yeah, I'm still not over Marvel casting Pedro Pascal instead of John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic. And according to this poll I posted months ago, other people feel the same way. I mean, more people voted for Terry Crews than they did for Pedro Pascal. Also, Djimon Hounsou is much more of a character now. He finally has a name. He's Henry with an I, and he's not in the film too much, but he does have a couple really memorable scenes. And there's one in particular that shows what people are willing to do to survive in this world. So yeah, Henry is a lot more memorable in this film than he was in part 2. Earlier in this video, I said Cillian Murphy's Emmett was my favorite character in this franchise. I now have to rescind this statement because I have a new favorite character. Frodo the Cat, baby. Whoa! Frodo the Cat is such a trooper in this movie. He goes through so much and he actually adds stakes because as a cat lover, I did not want to see anything happen to this little guy. And I like that he's actually important to the story as a service animal. He's actually used as a service pet at many different points in the story. Kind of similar to how Perito was used in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. So yeah, A Quiet Place Day 1 really surprised me. I did not expect to love this movie as much as I did. So I'm going to throw it in S tier. And that's the A Quiet Place tier list. I know this was a very short ranking, but don't worry, I have a much longer one coming out next week. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that. And click on this video if you want to watch the most underrated horror film of the year. Or if you're in the mood for something else, you can click on this video that YouTube picked out just for you. Yeah, these are both good videos. You should definitely click on one of them. Either one, they're both pretty good. Just click on one of them. You'll be happy, I promise.